Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Kahr Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology, it's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Kahr Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the...
Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report for the fourth day in the sixth month, 16th year of Chungi. The King's Report News Hour. Tim Miller is sitting in for second king, Tony Gook. And I apologize that the message didn't get to a lot of people. And I gave a sort of a sudden notice yesterday, and it was a brief notice. And I realized that a lot of people didn't get the message. But from today and until July 9th, I'm going to have to do the King's Report an hour later than usual. So please be aware of that. I got this one email from someone who's ready to start a revolution because she's afraid that this King's Report is being suppressed. And I won't tell you her name, but says K report today, Saturday, 6/28/2025. Not functioning. Why? Please, brothers and sisters, leaders in America, and Tim Elder, something is blatantly wrong. Why has King's Report been attacked? Well, it was attacked by me, I'm afraid. By whom? Family Fed or Sanctuary Church leaders? Please let's not get caught up in disunity. Who is perfect? What? That makes me curious. Someone saying I'm not perfect. Of course, I'm not, but that's beside the point. Support K Report broadcast. Okay, yes, I like that final one for sure. But you don't need to go for your pitchforks. Everything is okay. Everything is okay at King's Report land. Just an hour late, beginning today, and of course, on Sundays, we still don't have King's Report, but then 6 days next week, and then I guess what, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the week after that, I'm going to have to do the King's Report an hour later than usual because I have another sort of a conflicting schedule going on during that time. All right. Let's see. So let's go to see what's going on around the kingdom, right? Let's see what's going on here. Okay, here we go. So in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, currently 69 degrees. Sunny skies. I'm getting up to 87 today. Some sun, then turning cloudy with a heavy thunderstorm. Not as hot, but humid. And that's today 87 and then 67 tonight. Thunderstorm around this evening, otherwise cloudy and humid. And in Cheongju, North Pyongan province in Korea, father's hometown, currently 79, cloudy, and getting down to 71 tonight. Tomorrow, occasional morning rain, otherwise very humid. Considerable cloudiness, high of 81. Cheondeokgung Palace, northeast Pennsylvania, 61 degrees right now, cloudy. 85 for high today, considerable clouds and humid. Tonight, 67 for a low, a heavy thunderstorm in the evening. Clouds breaking, humid, storms can bring flash flooding. At the Liberty Rock RV Parking Campground in Limestone County, Texas, currently 72 and mostly sunny. 93 for a high today, mostly sunny and humid. 74 tonight, low, clear, and humid. And then at the Suncheon Palace in Korea, 79 degrees and mostly clear right now. 73 for a low tonight, uncomfortably humid with low clouds. Korea is going through the rainy season, or some people call it the monsoon season. Tomorrow, high of 94. Yes, mostly sunny, hot, and humid. Danger of dehydration and heart stroke if outside for extended periods of time. And then, the Gunma Palace is in Japan. 85 degrees right now, mostly cloudy. 69 for a low tonight. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy and hot. Possible danger of dehydration and heat stroke, not heart stroke, but heat stroke while doing strenuous activities, high of 92. And in Ilan, Taiwan, right now it is 81 degrees and clear. Low tonight of 77. And tomorrow rather cloudy and hot. high of 95, a thunderstorm in 1 or 2 spots in the afternoon. All right, let's go to Father's Word. Let's see here. The life of true filial piety. Life of true filial piety. Let me put some light on it. Okay. The background is different. Well, you're seeing reflections of what's in front of me. You'll see people walking back and forth. That's reflections on the window behind me. And so anyway, so that's what that is. Even if your father, what's the polite way of saying it, soils his underwear, and even does even worse things, you must love him as if you were a child. And that kind of a son or daughter is the filial child. That is the kind of son or daughter who is able to go to heaven. Yeah, well, I think when you're actually faced with that situation, and I was faced with that situation once, quite a long time ago. But my mother passed away from cancer back in '79, and I visited her in the hospital, and I did a little bit of wiping. But I figured, hey, she did it for me when I was a baby, and she didn't complain, and so I did it for her, and she was a little bit embarrassed, but I still remember it as a kind of a good experience with my mother. One of the last experiences that I had with her, unfortunately. Anyway, so yeah, does that mean I'm going to heaven? Let's hope. It may take 1 or 2 things more than that, but yeah, it's when you're actually faced with that situation, especially if you remember how much your father or mother has sacrificed for you during their lives. It's not a difficult thing to do. All right, let's go and see what's going on. And so President Trump, I think, went to bed very happily last night, and he's probably still grinning. Maybe he's probably already at work, but I think he's still in a good mood. If you want anything from him, if you want to, if MAGA wants something from him, this is probably a good time to ask for it. The Supreme Court gave him a lot of good decisions, or several good decisions yesterday, and I think he's very, very happy about those. Final day of SCOTUS decisions brings wave of history-making rulings. And here it says that the Supreme Court had a banner day on Friday, the last decision day of the High Court's term. The Supreme Court's term goes from October through late June, or sometimes early July, but basically late June. Court's terms involving the justices reining in judicial power and serving up a victory for parents in the ongoing culture wars. The High Court's more controversial decisions were split along ideological lines. Liberal justices sometimes dissented with bitter rebukes, while the Trump administration celebrated what it viewed as landmark wins. And especially this whole thing, for nationwide injunctions. That's basically been rolled back now by the Supreme Court. In the most high-profile case of the day, the Supreme Court ended the practice of judges issuing sweeping injunctions that cover the whole country and not just parties involved in a case. And this has been a really frustrating thing for President Trump. He can't walk 3 steps without some judge somewhere in the country saying, "Oh, don't take a 4th step, temporary injunction." And it's been pretty frustrating for him. Seems like he can't do anything. He can't do anything. But now the Supreme Court has freed him, and so now he's going to be much freer doing all sorts of things that he wants. The injunctions, often known as nationwide injunctions, have been a source of frustration for President Donald Trump as judges side with plaintiffs and block key parts of the president's agenda. The case arose from several judges issuing injunctions that blocked Trump from carrying out his birthright citizenship plan. Rather than ask the Supreme Court to weigh in on the merits of the plan, which has been uniformly rejected in courts, Trump asked the high court to put a stop to the injunction practice. So they didn't even try to, the Trump administration did not even try to defend the birthright citizenship, or the, let's say, the denial of birthright citizenship. I'm next to a kitchen here. You may have heard some dishes went crashing down. They didn't even, the Justice Department didn't even try to defend that at the Supreme Court. And yeah, I mean, the 14th Amendment pretty clearly says that anyone born in the United States is an American citizen. No ifs, ands, or buts. And so they decided that was going to be a rough road to hoe. And so they said, okay, well, instead of doing that, let's go after the nationwide injunctions. And they were successful on that point. So, the case arose from several judges issuing injunctions that blocked Trump from carrying out his birthright citizenship plan, rather than ask the Supreme Court to weigh in on the merits of the plan, which has been uniformly rejected in courts. Trump asked the high court to put a stop to the injunction practice. The Supreme Court's 6-3 decision left open the possibility that judges and plaintiffs could use other avenues, such as class action lawsuits, to seek broad relief now that the high court has curtailed nationwide injunctions. And I'm sure the Democrats will try, but it'll be more difficult. I think class action lawsuits are certainly a lot more difficult. It's not something that a judge can just write a decision while he's eating breakfast or something. And some of these have come so quickly, you have to suspect that probably the orders, the injunction orders, were prepared even before the application went in. All right, so that's the nationwide injunctions. On parental rights, the Supreme Court decided 6-3 in Mahmoud versus Taylor that parents can opt their children out of a Maryland public school system's lessons when they contain themes about homosexuality and transgenderism if they feel the content conflicts with their religious beliefs. And Justice Samuel Alito, writing for the majority, said the government burdens the religious exercise of parents when it requires them to submit their children to instruction that poses a very real threat of undermining the religious beliefs and practices that parents wish to install. And this is Justice Sotomayor. I'm sure she's not happy about that. She's one of the liberal judges. The Trump administration celebrated the ruling as a victory for parental rights, while Justice Sonia Sotomayor said in a scathing dissent that the high court's decision would open floodgates for students to opt out of a wider range of lessons. Okay, so why is that bad? Why is that bad? Why is it bad that parents have, or even the students themselves in some cases, have more to say about their education? But remember, the basic philosophy of public school teachers, at least their unions, is that parents, they say, well, what education degree do the parents have? Where did they get their master's in education? Right? We are the experts. We are the professionals. So you should leave your children's education up to us. And parents have no right to interfere in the children's education, especially if it is discovered that the parents belong to a certain unpopular, relatively small religious community that is unpopular with liberals and globalists and communists, right? Especially, right? Then it becomes the teacher's mission to separate the child and even encourage the child to do what they can to pull their parents to be the savior, right? To pull their parents out of that. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit too autobiographical here. Okay. All right. Anyway, so now the Supreme Court has sided with the parents on that one. That's good. Okay. All right. Now, age verification of explicit websites. Okay. The Supreme Court allowed Texas to require age verification for users of pornographic websites, dealing a win to those aiming to block children from accessing explicit material online. All right, so let's just hope the kids never find out about VPNs. Yeah, this is not going to be very effective, I'm afraid. Yeah. The Trade Association for the Porn Industry brought the lawsuit alleging the age requirement meant the state was unconstitutionally regulating free speech on the internet. Yeah, this is not going to be very effective. Yeah, you got to do it some other way. Okay, uh, you got to educate your children. That's the way to do it. This is a major victory for children, parents, and the ability of. Come on, let's just skip. That one's even silly. I mean, come on, like kids don't know about VPNs. All right, okay. All right, voting rights. The Supreme Court punted its case about Louisiana's congressional maps, indicated it needed a few more questions answered during oral arguments in the fall. The delay means Louisiana's map of voting districts, including majority Black districts, would not see any changes until the 2028 election cycle or later. Okay. And the Supreme Court is now set to wind down in anticipation of the summer recess, though it is still expected to hand down some straggling decisions before its next term begins in October. All right, so anyway, President Trump, especially the nationwide injunction thing, I'm sure he's very, very happy about that. And so now he's going to go full throttle with all the things that he's doing for immigration and what else? Tariffs and so forth. Maybe tariffs, yeah. And other things that he's been doing by executive order. And now the conservative majority on the Supreme Court seems willing to allow him to do that. But let's remember, though, the fundamental principle of politics is do unto others as they are doing unto you. Right. There's politics is always almost always about revenge, unfortunately. So next time when a Democrat president is in, he's going to sign hundreds and hundreds of executive orders and say, hey, look, hey, the Supreme Court back in June 2025 gave me the right to do this, and he'll be right. So it's good for President Trump. Not sure how good it's going to be on the long run. All right, let's see here. I want to yesterday we had some inflation news coming out, and let's talk a little bit about inflation and stuff and tariffs. Okay. And the inflation news that came out yesterday, and some, the especially progressive media, liberal media, progressive is not the right word, communist. Anyway, the media are saying, Trump is sending inflation up, but actually it did go up a little bit, but not very much. And so CBS News is asking the question, the Trump tariffs aren't causing U.S. prices to spike. And here's why, they say. So let's take a look. And here's Jerome Powell. Despite concerns earlier this year that President Trump's tariffs would cause a renewed bout of inflation, the prices of goods and services across the U.S. have remained relatively stable. I think they have a graph here. Yeah, so this is the graph. And this is year-over-year inflation, comparing prices each month to the same month a year earlier. While overall inflation has eased from its 2022 peak, many household costs remain elevated. Okay, so yeah, the prices are not coming down. That's true, but that's and I know during the election season, all sorts of candidates are saying, I'm going to bring prices down. Well, that's possible, but that means deflation, and governments that have a lot of debt fear deflation more than anything, probably more than anything, more than a nuclear attack, maybe even, because deflation really means annihilation, because deflation means that your debt becomes more difficult to repay. The value of the debt is going up, whereas inflation reduces the value of their debt, makes it easier for you to repay your debt. And there is this 2% figure, and they say that the Fed's goal for inflation is to bring it down to 2%. Why 2%? why not 1.5 or 2.5 or even 3 or 4? Why 2%? So one time I saw a member of Congress ask Jerome Powell, I think it was, that very question. Where does this 2% come from? And his answer was interesting. He's a lawyer. And he said, well, this is the consensus of central banks around the world. Does that answer the question for you? No, it doesn't, does it? Why? Why did the central banks around the world decide that 2% was the number? And it's true. Japan, Korea, Europe, everybody says 2%, 2%, 2%. Where did that come from? Is it like the 6 feet? Remember the 6 feet in the COVID, right? And later on, Fauci admitted that actually, we made it up. So is it that kind of a thing? Well, I think there's a little bit more thought. This is my opinion as a amateur news observer. I think when they got together, when the central banks around the world got together, and they said, "Well, listen, we got to agree on what we're going to do about inflation. What's our target? What's our target? Okay, all right. So let's make a list of things that we know we want. Number one, we want inflation. Okay. We want inflation because we do not want deflation. That's for sure, because we all have debts. Yeah, pretty much all countries in the world have debts. Not everyone, but pretty close to it. Maybe some small countries don't, but most countries in the world have debts, and so they don't want deflation because that makes it more difficult to repay those debts. All right, we want inflation. If inflation is too high, right, then consumers will be expecting even higher inflation, and that in itself will make inflation go up and up and up and up and up, and we'll have hyperinflation. And we don't want hyperinflation either. That destroys the currency, and we don't want that. We want to preserve the currency. Anyway, another reason we want inflation is because, and listen, in the case of the United States, I just looked this up before we started, and this is really amazing. The percentage of the GDP, the gross domestic product, the whole sort of the size of the economy, right? In other words, the total amount of goods and services produced by the US economy over the course of a year. The percentage of GDP that is taken up by consumer spending, I thought it'd be 30% or 40%, but no. It's between 68 and 70%. Wow. Consumer spending takes up 68 and 70%. Wow. And government spending is, let's see, about a quarter of that. Yeah, about a quarter of that. So it's as if we are, based on that, if I didn't know anything else about America, if I judged what America is just based on that figure, I would figure it must be a nation of couch potatoes. You're sitting on your couch every day, eating potato chips, right? Eating potato chips and whatever else it is that you buy at your convenience store, and watching television, and drinking beer. I mean, consumer spending is 68 to 70%. That's quite shocking to me. So, if one thing about deflation is that it will discourage consumer spending because the value of people's money was going up when it's deflation. People will say, well, wait a second. Instead of buying a new car this year, why don't we wait until next year? Because of deflation, our money will be worth more next year. The price of cars will go down next year instead of up. And so we can get a better deal next year than we can this year. And so if the consumer spending is 68 to 70%, you can understand why governments hear something like that. So, whoa, no, you got to get people spending. And if you don't spend, then inflation acts as a tax. And if you just let your money sit in the bank in one of those high yield savings accounts, high yield savings accounts. Yeah, I saw some advertisements for high yield savings accounts, so something like 4 point something percent. Well, if you really believe that and this is by the way, the consumer price index is a little bit higher than the figure that came out yesterday, but you know, your price index, I'm sure, is probably higher than 3% or something like that, or even 4%. And by the time you pay taxes, you have to pay income tax on that interest income. So those high yield savings accounts are still not going to save you from inflation. In my not financial advice, never financial advice, but that would seem to me to be the case. So governments certainly don't like deflation. Also, 2%, I think they feel is probably the happy medium where it is inflation, but it's not so much that it will cause hyperinflation or a danger like that. And so they say, okay, well, 2%. And so now, just like the 6 feet during COVID, all the central banks around the world, 2%, 2%, 2%. Yeah, maybe it's the peace symbol. I don't know. Maybe it's because, have you ever seen a young East Asian teenagers take photographs? Always it's this, right? 2%, 2%. They're communicating with the central banks around the world. Okay. All right. So, let's take a look at this story about the tariffs and why they're not causing inflation to rise or prices to rise. So it says here that the personal consumption expenditures price index, the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation gauge, rose 2.3% in May, modestly above the central bank's 2% annual target. See that? 2% annual target. Is CBS going to explain to us why that's an annual target? No. Just that's faith, all right? That's gospel. The May consumer price index rose at an annual rate of 2.4%, cooler than economists expected. In other words, less. The muted inflation data reflects short-term steps taken by some companies to offset the tariff impact, such as pre-ordering inventory. In other words, importing stuff or else getting it from the wholesalers before the tariffs take effect, absorbing the cost of some tariffs to cushion the consumers from price hikes, because they want to maintain market share, and leveraging loopholes to delay or lower duty payments, economists say. Many businesses have been creative and savvy in using different means to buffer the initial shock, EY Parthenon chief economist Gregory Daco told CBS Money Watch. That doesn't mean consumers and businesses who were battered by the highest inflation in decades during the pandemic are out of the woods. Gennady Goldberg, head of U.S. rates strategy at TD Securities, thinks prices are likely to rise as tariffs gradually push up import costs in the second half of this year. And depending on what President Trump decides on between now and July 9th, I think that's very possible. July 9th is kind of the, 3-month deadline. 3 months ago, April 9th, that was Liberation Day, right, or Independence Day. And he said, well, okay, now 125% for you, 125% for you, 125% for you. And all the countries said, well, come on. And he said, okay, I'll give you 90 days. And those 90 days are going to be up on July 9th. And so we'll see what kind of tariffs he actually imposes on July 9th or July 10th. But I think it's entirely possible that prices will go up as a result of the tariffs. In my opinion, not financial advice. We still think in a few months we'll continue to see the impact of the new trade policies on price levels, and they should translate into higher inflation, Goldberg said. Here are 3 reasons why tariffs haven't driven up inflation as much as economists expected, at least for now. Aggressive front-loading after the Trump administration announced a range of tariffs on Canada, China, Mexico, and dozens of other countries earlier this year, many companies scramble to stock up or front load on products, parts, and other imports to avoid incurring added tariff costs. And by the way, yesterday, President Trump said he is breaking off all talks with Canada. He says that they have really been attacking us and he doesn't want to talk to them anymore on the tariff issue. They tried to front run the imposition of the duties by importing rapidly, Dacko said. They bought goods they needed and stocked them, so that was the first line of defense against the tariffs. Much of the extra inventory remains in warehouses or on store shelves, allowing importers to delay price hikes. Lots of retailers pre-ordered inventory before the tariffs went into effect, so the inventory they're selling has not been marked up yet, Goldberg said. Of course, inventory has storage costs, right? You put it in a warehouse or whatever, and you have to pay for that storage space. So there still is some cost, but not as much as the tariffs will be. Some businesses facing higher tariffs are choosing to hold off on passing any cost increases through to consumers as they wait for the fog around U.S. trade policy to lift. The Trump administration in April froze most of the tariffs for 90 days to allow time for negotiations, with that pause due to expire on July 9th. And after announcing tariffs as much as 145% with Chinese imports earlier this year, Mr. Trump and Chinese officials on Thursday said the two countries have agreed on the framework for a trade deal. And China is the largest trading partner of the United States now. So that is, and of course, you know, China, the factory for the world. So we'll see what Walmart does. We have had literally dozens of changes in tariff policy in the last 5 months. In that highly uncertain environment, companies that sell items that are subject to tariff may be cautious about raising prices immediately. Charlie Ballard, professor of economics emeritus at Michigan State University, told CBS Money Watch. Companies often refrain from raising prices to avoid scaring away consumers and losing market share to competitors. And in Dacko, essentially, some businesses decided to not immediately pass on the cost. They said, let's see if we can hold out for a month, delay some imports, use the inventory on hand, and be creative in terms of our broader pricing strategy. And then lower tariff costs, although Mr. Trump has announced sky-high tariff rates, the actual duties collected at U.S. border so far are lower than the official rates. That's because some importers have been able to skirt the levies by storing goods in so-called bonded warehouses or foreign trade zones. Businesses can use bonded warehouses, which are usually located near major commercial ports, to temporarily store goods, components, and other inputs without immediately having to pay tariffs or taxes. If you make use of a warehouse or so-called foreign trade zone, you are able to delay the payment of tariffs until these goods are put into commerce, Dacko said. So it's a free trade zone or imaginary area that is not subject to tariffs. But you can eventually, though, they have to come out of that zone, and when they do, then you have to pay the tariff. Additionally, the U.S. has implemented a number of, if you're driving around in Virginia, for example, I noticed, I think it's on I-66, there's an exit that points to an inland port. And it's not near an ocean. Okay, it's inland, but it's a port. In other words, these containers come off the ships, you know, somewhere on the Atlantic coast, and then trucks will bring them, and they're in this. So it's a kind of a free trade zone or something like that, and it's as if the containers are still on the ship. And so that's one way. And then, you know, of course, you can keep the container there until you actually need the stuff that's inside. And then who knows, by that time, the tariff policy may have changed and so forth, and you don't have to pay as much. So that's one way. Another way that the people are saving on tariffs. Additionally, the U.S. has implemented a number of tariff exemptions and exclusions. In practice, that has resulted in the actual levies on imports often being lower than the nominal rate initially announced by the White House. As of June, the effective U.S. tariff rate on all imports was around 10%, compared with an official average tariff rate of 15%. Still, businesses can't hold the line on price hikes indefinitely if tariffs remain elevated, experts say. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell told lawmakers this week that tariffs could yet spark higher inflation, likely starting this summer. Part of that is due to the start-stop nature of the tariffs that have been introduced. James Roster, head of the global macro strategy at TD Securities, told CBS Money Watch, "For us, it's a question of patience more than a mystery as to where it is. The typical pass-through takes some time. We expect July to be when you start seeing it more." So what is missing from this article? The falling value of the dollar, right? I pointed out, I think yesterday, that when President Trump was inaugurated, the dollar was at, I believe, the dollar index, I'm sorry, the dollar index, that's the index. Okay, just let me just click to the wrong icon. Clicked on the wrong icon. There we go. Where do I want to go? Okay, here we go. I wanted this one. Okay. Oh no, I clicked on the wrong icon again. What's going on here? Come on. Uh-oh. Did I stop accidentally stop the broadcast on the Twitch? Can you check that? I'm asking tech team to do something. Anyway, let's see here. Let's see Epic Times. Where am I trying to go? Cameraman. The dollar index since President Trump was inaugurated has been straight down. Right. This is the 1 year, so let's look at the 6 months. President Trump was inaugurated right here, right? January 20th. And 109 was the dollar index at that time, 109.50, something like that, or 37 anyway, 109. And today it's down to 97. So 12%, roughly 12% decline in the dollar, and it's almost straight down. Here, during, I think this is one of the Middle East crises that came up, the dollar regained some strength because people were using it as a safe haven. But once that is resolved, then again, it's continuing its downward thing. So the overall trend since January 20th is a very clear downward trend. And why is that important? Well, it's important because, okay, thank you. Because when the dollar becomes less valuable against other currencies, that raises the price of imports from the country that's using that currency. So, for example, okay, the biggest trading partner, well actually, let's look at the euro, for example. Okay, and the euro in this chart, when the line goes up, that's the euro becoming stronger and the dollar becoming weaker. Okay, and here again, January 20th is right there. Okay, so again, the euro when Trump was inaugurated was about 1.03 or 1.04, $1.04 or so. Okay, about $1.04. That's what 1 euro would buy. But now the euro buys much more than that. It buys now $1.17. So that makes it easier for U.S. exports, but the import prices are going up. And so that's more than a 10%, basically a tariff. It's not a tariff, but it has the same effect as a tariff because it's raising the prices of imported goods. And people seem to treat tariffs and the dollar separately, but I think, well, this is what other I've read experts say that when President Trump first started, he was going to do tariff. but he pretty soon figured out that that's not such a good thing, that has all sorts of other ramifications. So now what he's doing is just suppressing the value of the dollar on purpose, intentionally. He's not going to say that because, President Trump always says, the dollar has to be number one. The dollar is best, and anybody who attacks the dollar, the BRICS or anybody else, we're going to destroy them, this kind of thing. He's always sort of feels that it's patriotic to support the dollar. But in reality, during his, what is it now, 5 months on the job, the dollar has been going straight down. Not straight down, but pretty steep slope going down. And I guess we can expect it to continue. And if the Fed cuts rates, what effect will that have on the dollar? It will make the dollar less attractive for foreign investors. And so that will be an additional pressure against the dollar. Because when rates go down in the United States, that means that investors will look and say, well, look, we can only get this much in the United States. Where can we get more? Well, now there are other places where we can get more for our money than the United States. So they take their money elsewhere. Also, there is a group or some people within the Trump administration that are proposing to encourage non-US citizens to sell their US assets. For example, by levying a tax on foreign-owned assets. Now, one effect this would have, of course, would be that it would discourage members of the Chinese Communist Party from buying land that's right next to military bases in the United States, which has been going on, as we know. And China's been buying a lot of real estate in America, as they've been buying a lot of real estate in Korea. They've been buying a lot of real estate in Japan. Jeju Island, I think, in Korea seems like it's been pretty much been bought up by the Chinese. But anyway, to charge a tax, maybe 3.5%, something like that, on foreign-owned assets. If that becomes law, and it hasn't yet become law, but if that becomes law, then what effect will that have on the dollar? Well, that will also be a pretty strong impetus for further devaluation of the dollar, for a further downward push of the dollar. Okay. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll see what happens with that. And also, of course, the whole thing with the tax on possible remittances, right? In the future, if people send money from the United States to another country, they may have to prove that they are U.S. citizens. And if you're not a U.S. citizen, you may have to pay a tax, a 2%, 3% tax, something like that. And that will make the dollar less attractive now, because one of the reasons that the dollar is so attractive is that you can go in and out very easily, and because there's free flow of capital in and out of the United States. But now if you're going to start charging taxes on people who take money out of the United States, or you start charging taxes on people who purchase U.S. assets, then it's going to make it less attractive for investors. And so the overall sort of trend of the Trump administration seems to be to push the value of the dollar down, 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 down. So what the effect of that will be that import prices will rise, even without any tariffs. Without any tariffs, import prices will rise. Right? So we'll see what happens with that. The big, beautiful bill, President Trump's own sort of self-imposed deadline for that, the Republicans to get that to him is July 4th. That's the end of next week. We'll see whether the Republicans are able to keep that deadline. And we'll see what's in that bill when it finally gets to the president's desk, and we'll see what he does with it. All right, let's see. What else do we have going on today? Right. Let's go to Newsmax to see what they have going on. Senate rejects Democrats' effort to shackle Trump on Iran. Yeah, they were going to pass a War Powers Act, but oops, Iran and Israel decided to call it quits, at least for the big ones. But as I mentioned, I think I had an article yesterday. Actually, it was a post on General Flynn's site, x.com, where he was listing all the sort of the violations, I think, or someone was listing the violations. And he says, I'll bomb again if Iran pursues nukes. Well, I certainly hope not. But, he's given his threats some credibility now, so let's hope that they will take those threats seriously and not do that, at least not for a few years. Iran says there are no plans for new U.S. nuclear talks. President Trump said that there will be, so we'll see who was actually telling the truth. Okay. And Trump hopes for Gaza truce perhaps next week. That would be nice. That would be sort of keeping the ball rolling there. President Trump voiced optimism Friday about a new ceasefire in the Gaza Strip as criticism grew over mounting civilian deaths at the Israeli-backed food distribution centers in the territory. Asked by reporters how close a ceasefire was between Israel and Hamas, Trump said, "We think within the next week we're going to get a ceasefire." The United States brokered a ceasefire in the devastating conflict in the waning days of the Biden administration with support from Trump's incoming team. Yeah, and that was basically Trump that was doing that. Israel broke the ceasefire in March, launching new devastating attacks on Hamas, which attacked Israel October 7th. Israel also, in 2023, Israel also stopped all food and other supplies from entering Gaza for more than 2 months, drawing warnings of famine. Israel has since allowed a resumption of food aid through the U.S. and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which involves American security contractors with Israeli troops at the periphery. U.S. officials on Friday said the GHF system was leading to mass killings of people seeking aid, drawing accusations from Israel that the United Nations was aligning itself with Hamas. Hamas is always trying to pull the heartstrings of the world, right? Oh, look what they're doing to us. Look how many of us they've killed and stuff like that. So, and yes, people have died, but Hamas is, I think, guilty of exaggerating, and they have to exaggerate. That's how they get donations from around the world and political support from around the world as well. Eyewitnesses and local officials have reported repeated killings of Palestinians at distribution centers in recent weeks in the territory where Israeli forces are battling Hamas militants. The Israeli military has denied targeting people and said GHF has denied any deadly incidents were linked to its sites. But after weeks of reports, UN officials and other aid providers on Friday denounced what they said was a wave of killings of hungry people seeking aid. The new aid distribution system has become a killing field with people shot at while trying to access food for themselves and their families. This person said the abomination must end through a return to humanitarian deliveries from the UN, including UNRWA, he wrote on X. And the reason that those deliveries stopped was they were going to Hamas, and then Hamas was not distributing them to the people. And UNRWA, of course, was actually not just supporting, but also sort of basically participating with Hamas in their war against Israel. The health ministry in the Hamas-controlled territory. Well, again, ding, 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 propaganda bells should be going off just by that expression, says that since May, more than 500 people have been killed near aid centers while seeking scarce supplies. Okay, well, how many of those 500 were actually soldiers, Hamas soldiers? They're not going to. They never distinguish between soldiers and just actual civilians. The country's civil defense agency has also repeatedly reported people being killed while seeking aid. Okay, and Israel denies targeting civilians, but so let's hope that there can be a ceasefire that will hold next week. Let's hope that that does in fact happen. It's really painful and also kind of it's painful to read these articles, partly because of what they're saying, but also partly because we don't know whose word to trust. Right? We don't know what's actually going on, but we do know that people are dying, and we want people to stop dying. And let's see here, to ending talks with Canada, and he plans a letter telling countries their tariff rates. Okay, and Trump to look at protected status for Salvadorans. Yeah, I think a lot of Salvadorian people came to the United States when there was violence going on in the country, but now that has been pretty much been resolved. And so I think what this means is that people from El Salvador who are in the United States now will probably have to be heading back. Yeah, probably they'll be heading back pretty soon, looks like. He's going to name the next Fed chair early to weaken Powell. So Powell's term ends, I think, something like May of next year. And normally, President Trump would not name a successor until fairly close to the end of Jerome Powell's term. But no, he says I may name someone now so as to weaken Powell's influence. But as remember, who was it that appointed Powell in the first place? Trump appointed Powell in the first place, and Biden, of course, reappointed him for a second term. But he's there because President Trump had appointed him for the first term. All right, let's see here. Okay, Blackburn says that the injunction ruling is big for Trump. It is big for Trump. Yeah, we'll see what he does with that. Eric Trump says he's open to political office. Interesting, not Don Jr. During his Person of the Year interview in December, then President-elect Donald Trump was asked about a potential family political dynasty. Trump responded by mentioning several family members, including his middle son, Eric. Eric is very capable and a very different type than Don Jr., Trump told Time. More than 6 months later, Eric Trump told Financial Times the political path for a family dynasty would be an easy one. The real question is, do you want to drag other members of your family into it? The 41-year-old Trump told the outlet. And that's true. That's true. Especially if you're a Republican, unless he's going to run as a Democrat, which I doubt. But yeah, if you run as a Republican, basically you really go through the gauntlet, don't you? But let's say 3 years from now, when we're in the election season for a president, things may be different by then. Would I want my kids to live the same experience over the last decade that I've lived? If the answer was yes, I think the political path would be an easy one, meaning I think I could do it. And by the way, I think other members of our family could do it too. President Trump also mentioned his daughter Ivanka, son Don Jr., and Eric's wife Lara as being capable of thriving in a political career. Lara has been co-chair of the Republican National Committee. Ivanka worked in her father's first administration, but it sounds to me like Ivanka kind of got her fill of politics during that first 4 years. I think we noticed that she's pretty invisible during this second administration, including the election campaign. So she may have gotten politics out of her system, I think. Don Jr. has been heavily involved in his father's presidential campaign and MAGA agenda. Eric, though, has been focused on the family business he has been entrusted with since President Trump's first term began in 2017. Eric Trump is co-executive vice president of the Trump Organization. In a recent interview on Newsmax, Eric Trump said his father and family remain in the political arena because we loved our nation. We do it for a love of country, told host Rita Crosby. We do it because we love this nation. It's clear we believe in this nation, and we can't fake that. We can't fake the love. Okay. The question is, do you want to do it? He added. And do you want to subject the people that you love to the brutality of this system? And I'm not sure if I can answer that question yet. Well, yeah. What do you think? I mean, if you and I probably will not be elected president, even if we tried, but suppose that we were in Eric Trump's shoes. Right? Suppose that. You know, it didn't used to be this way. Nixon's daughters, what were their names? I've forgotten it, but Nixon's daughters were adults when he ran in '68. I don't remember. I don't know what it was like in '60, but in '68 they were. Um, but of course, in '72 it became extremely well, not '72, but after '72, during the Watergate situation, it became extremely difficult for his family. But let's see, for example, well, Kennedy's kids were very, very small when he ran for president. Johnson had a couple of adult children, I think, right? I think so. Yeah. But in the past, it was not like it is today. You know, I think the president's family was pretty much off limits, but that's certainly not true today. And it's really kind of a cage fight, isn't it? Where there are no rules now. The media will just go after anybody and everybody that they can find anything on, and it doesn't matter if it's true or not. So I think for me, you really have to love your country a lot, and your family has to love your country a lot, and your family has to be united a lot. Okay. Have you seen the biographical movie about General Flynn, General Michael Flynn? I think in that movie, I was impressed to see the unity of the family. He was, attacked by the globalists and the left and so forth, and went through some very, very difficult situations. And if you haven't seen the movie, I highly encourage you to see it. It's available online. Normally, those kinds of situations will lead to divorce and children sort of moving away or separating themselves from the family. But at least from what we see in the movie, it appears that his family stayed with him and supported him throughout the ordeal. And that was very impressive to me. And so perhaps I'm not nominating him for president right now, but perhaps General Flynn would be a good candidate. I don't know. You have to have a lot of money, or you have to be very, very good at raising money. I think it costs something like $1 billion or more, I think, now to be president. Unfortunately, and the new Constitution is going to fix that, but that's the reality today. So you have to have a lot of money or be able to raise a lot of money. Obama was very good at raising money, and Biden was very good at raising money. Yes, he was, wasn't he? He was very good at raising money, yes, from all sorts of sources. So by hook or by crook, you got to be able to raise the money. Okay. Aren't we glad that he's in our rearview mirror now? Yes. All right. Let's see here. That's basically it this morning. Anything interesting on the Breitbart? I don't think so. Colombia, leftist unions try to sue senator critically injured in assassination. Well, that's not the university, but the country Colombia. Okay. All right. Trump effect spreads as Ecuador arrests top fugitive drug lord. Okay. All right. I got to go, I think. We have a few seconds left. All right. Yeah, let's go now. So, all right. So thank you very much for being here today. And as I mentioned, we're going to be an hour we're going to be on an hour delay from today until July 9th. And then from July 10th, I expect that I'll be back on my regular schedule and the regular background as well. I hope. Okay. God bless, Godspeed. May his kingdom come quickly.